Hey there, listeners. Are you ready to take your teaching to the next level? I'm thrilled to announce my upcoming webinar series, Transform Teaching Mathematics in the Middle, where we'll dive deep into practical strategies for closing learning gaps and empowering your students to succeed. Whether you're a teacher or a coach, this session is designed to help you map connections between math domains, leverage relationships to address learning gaps, and incorporate instructional routines that make your life easier, not harder. We'll also talk about spiraling content effectively and creating purposeful notes that stick. And the best part, these strategies are not just effective, they're manageable. Join me and other educators as we explore what's really happening in classrooms and work together to find solutions that work. This isn't your typical sit and listen webinar. Expect hands-on activities, real-world examples, and actionable takeaways that you can use the very next day. New episodes of this podcast drop every Sunday, but the webinar, that's happening January 27th through 30th. Mark your calendars because you won't want to miss this. Ready to sign up? Click the link in the show notes or head to buttonbarefruit.com/events. Spots are limited, so secure your seat today. I can't wait to see you there and help you make math happen. Welcome back to PD for the Soul, where we dive into the real work of teaching and learning one practical strategy at a time. I'm your host, Lanisha, and today we're unpacking an important topic that lies at the heart of effective teaching, formative assessments. If you've been in the classroom for any amount of time, you've probably heard the term thrown around, but what does it actually mean to use formative assessments to improve student outcomes? And how do we bridge the gap between the theory of formative assessments and what happens in real classrooms? That's exactly what we're exploring today. Inspired by the article Inside the Black Box, written by Black and Williams, released in 1998. In their research, they assert that improving formative assessments improve standards. They write that strengthening the practice of formative assessments produces significant and substantial gains. So before we get any deeper into this article, let's begin by defining formative assessments. The goal of formative assessments is to monitor student learning to provide ongoing feedback that can be used by teachers to improve their instruction and by students to improve their learning. More specifically, formative assessments help students identify their strengths and weaknesses and target areas that need work. They help faculty recognize where students are struggling and address problems immediately. Formative assessments are generally low stakes, which means they have low or no point value. So obviously the operative term here is feedback. Over the last couple of years, I've learned more and more about John Hattie. He's a professor and researcher in education. His research interests include performance indicators, models of measurement and evaluation of teaching, and learning, obviously. He is likely most well known for his books. However, I was introduced to him through the data he collected and the effect size related to student achievement. According to Black and Williams, effect size is the ratio of the average improvement in test scores to the range of scores for typical groups of students on that same test. John Hattie was able to demonstrate that influences, strategies, actions, and so on, with an effect size greater than 4/10, allows students to learn at an appropriate rate, meaning a year of growth for a year in school. In other words, a student who comes to your 6th grade class on a 4th grade level, these strategies, actions, and other influences that have an effect size of 4/10 or greater will result in this child leaving your class on the 5th grade level. The higher the effect size, the greater the growth. I share this because feedback has an effect size of 7/10, which means effective feedback can result in almost 2 years of growth. So again, referencing the student who came to your 6th grade class on the 4th grade level, they have the potential to leave on almost a 6th grade level. But just for sake of clarity, I want to share a definition for feedback. And I'm pulling this definition from the Visible Learning book by John Hattie, and he pulled this definition from Brooke Hart's 2008 release entitled How to Give Effective Feedback to Your Students. She defines it as just in time, just for me information delivered when and where it can do the most good. Now, I'll be transparent. This idea resonates deeply with me, especially in my role as a math coach. Over the course of a week, I visit several classrooms, and one noticeable trend always stands out. There's often an unseized opportunity to formatively assess students and provide them meaningful feedback. Here's the thing. It's not for lack of care or effort on the part of the teachers. More often, it's because teachers feel like they don't have the time to provide feedback beyond grading or they might not have the knowledge or confidence to know exactly how to move students forward. To address this, I took a small step. I added cool-down activities into our assessment platform called Mastery Connect so that this would at least allow students to get proficiency-based feedback immediately. But here's the rub. Knowing whether they're proficient is one thing. Knowing why they are or aren't and what comes next is a whole other challenge. According to Hattie, feedback is about the process, not just the task. When we focus on the process, we move students to deeper learning. Students should be aware of errors and have opportunities to address them. Feedback should prompt students to seek more information or reconsider their approach and reasoning or point out a path to pursue. It gives students agency and puts them in the driver's seat of their own learning. We don't want no passenger seat riders. We don't want no scrubs in our math class, right? So over time, it's going to reduce an over-reliance on outside judgment, namely you as the teacher. And it's going to build the student's ability to self-regulate. Let's take a closer look at Black and Williams' argument. They emphasize that strengthening formative assessments isn't a quick fix. It requires more than just us using assessment tools or just merely tracking data. Their research highlights the importance of a cultural shift that has to take place in the classroom. They argue that teachers need to build a culture of success where students believe they have the ability to achieve. And here's the kicker. Students need to be trained to self-assess. That means giving them a clear picture of the process to get from where they are to where we want them to be. In Black and Williams' framework, this sweet spot consists of 3 key components. Knowledge of the goal. The students need to know, what are we working towards? Where are we going? Number 2, knowledge of current performance in relation to the goal. So where am I right now? Number 3, knowledge of how to meet or exceed the goal. What specific things do I need to do to get from where I am to the goal or beyond? And I also want us to think about students who have already reached the goal. Oftentimes we forget about the kids who are already on grade level, who have already mastered the skill. So let's not forget them either. So I'm going to add that one in there. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. In my district, we actually have a framework in place to help teachers think about students' pathway to proficiency. We use pre-assessments, interim assessments, and post-assessments throughout each unit. These are created collaboratively by district teachers and used as a formative tool to guide instruction. And we don't just stop at administering the assessments. We hold data talks to discuss student performance versus their projections. Teachers are constantly thinking about how to move students to proficiency, using common tools to measure the effectiveness of their methods. But here's the challenge. Even with this structure, the feedback that students received is often the missing link. The reality of large class sizes and a growing number of students with unfinished learning makes it difficult for teachers to provide tailored feedback to every individual student. So where do we go from here? How do we ensure that formative assessments do more than just collect data? How do we use them to build a culture of success and help students clearly see their pathway to proficiency? Black and Williams research gives us a starting point, but the real challenge lies in making it actionable. As educators, we need to ask ourselves, are we helping students understand what success looks like? Do they know where they stand in relation to the goal? And most importantly, do they know what steps they can take to get there? This isn't just about teachers. It's about empowering students to take ownership of their learning. When students understand the why and how, they become active participants in their journey. Here are a few things to consider when giving feedback. I'm pulling this information from John Hattie's Visible Learning book, and he references Brooke Hart's book that was again released in 2008. And I'm making a note to myself to purchase her book. So according to Brooke Hart, feedback strategies can vary in timing, amount, mode, and audience. With regard to timing, we should provide immediate feedback for knowledge of facts. So right versus wrong. We should delay feedback slightly for more comprehensive reviews of student thinking and their processing. We should never delay feedback beyond when it would make a difference. And we should provide feedback as often as is practical for all major assignments. Okay, so you might be thinking all major assignments. Oh my goodness. So now let's talk about the amount of feedback. We need to prioritize picking the most important topics. Choose topics that relate to major learning goals and consider students' developmental levels. Now, in terms of mode, like how do we give the feedback? Think about oral, written, visual, or demonstration. Select the best mode for the message. Interactive feedback is best when possible. Written feedback on written work, and then use demonstration if students need an example. in terms of audience. So obviously we have the individual student or we have the whole class. Providing individual feedback says that the teacher values my learning. We provide that group or class feedback if most of the class missed the same concept, which is also an indicator that this is an opportunity for reteaching. As we wrap up, I want to hear from you. How are you using formative assessments in your classroom or in your school? What's working? What feels like a roadblock? I'm inviting you to join the conversation by clicking the link in the episode description to join the Math Collective. It's a space where we can connect directly, share ideas, and support each other in this work. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of PD for the Soul. Remember, new episodes drop every Sunday at 9 a.m., so be sure to subscribe and share this podcast with your colleagues. Until next time, keep making math happen.